You've noticed it in yourself and others. The smartest people you know seem the least happy. Your brilliant friend overthinks every decision until they're paralyzed. Your intellectually gifted colleague sees problems everywhere, others see solutions. You lie awake at 3 a.m. analyzing conversations from 5 years ago while your less analytical friends sleep peacefully. The person who scored highest on every test struggles with basic contentment, while their average classmates seem genuinely fulfilled. This isn't coincidence or irony. There's a philosophical explanation for why intelligence often correlates with misery, and it comes from one of history's most penetrating thinkers. Arthur Schopenhauer spent his life examining why brilliant minds suffer more than simple ones, and what he discovered was both disturbing and illuminating. The conventional wisdom suggests that intelligence should make life easier and more satisfying. Smart people can solve problems faster, understand complex situations better, and navigate challenges more effectively. But Schopenhauer realized that intelligence is often a burden rather than a gift, a source of suffering rather than liberation. His insights explain why the most thoughtful people often struggle with depression, why analytical minds get trapped in cycles of rumination, and why intellectual achievement rarely translates to personal happiness. Understanding Schopenhauer's analysis doesn't just explain this paradox. It provides a path toward using your intelligence more wisely, finding genuine peace despite your analytical nature, and transforming your mental gifts from sources of suffering into tools for authentic fulfillment. The philosopher who understood intelligent misery. Arthur Schopenhauer wasn't an academic philosopher content with abstract theories. He was a man who lived his philosophy, experiencing firsthand the burden of an exceptionally analytical mind. Born into wealth in 1788, he could have chosen a comfortable, unreflective life. Instead, he spent decades examining why existence felt like such a struggle, particularly for those cursed with the ability to see clearly. Schopenhauer's central insight was that life is fundamentally driven by what he called the will, using this as a human's most familiar designation for the concept that can also be signified by other words such as desire, striving, wanting, effort, and urging. This wasn't a religious or mystical concept, but a psychological observation about human nature. We are constantly wanting something, pursuing goals, trying to satisfy desires that multiply faster than we can fulfill them. For most people, this condition remains largely unconscious. They chase pleasures and avoid pains without deeply questioning the process. But intelligent people have a problem. They can see the machinery operating. They recognize that it is through the will, the in itself of all existence, that humans find all their suffering. Desire for more is what causes this suffering. The philosopher observed that intelligent minds operate like powerful magnifying glasses, amplifying both the beauty and horror of existence. Where an average person might experience mild disappointment, the analytical person experiences existential despair. Where others feel momentary pleasure, the thoughtful individual recognizes its fleeting nature and anticipates its loss. Schopenhauer identified what we might call the oscillation of human existence. He noted that life itself is a sea full of rocks and whirlpools that man avoids with the greatest caution and care, although he knows that, even when he succeeds with all his efforts and ingenuity in struggling through, at every step he comes nearer to the greatest, the total, the inevitable, and irremediable shipwreck, indeed even steers right onto it, namely death. Intelligent people see this pattern clearly, which makes it impossible to participate unconsciously. They can't lose themselves in simple pleasures because they understand too much about how those pleasures work and how temporary they are. The philosopher's own life exemplified this principle. Despite his intellectual achievements and financial security, he struggled with depression, pessimism, and social isolation. His understanding of life's mechanisms didn't exempt him from their operation. It simply made him more aware of his own psychological imprisonment. Schopenhauer's analysis went deeper than personal observation. He studied history, literature, and human behavior across cultures, finding the same patterns everywhere. The most creative and intelligent individuals, artists, philosophers, scientists, consistently reported higher rates of mental suffering than their less gifted peers. This wasn't accidental, but inevitable. The philosopher realized that intelligence creates a unique form of suffering, the ability to see problems without the power to solve them fundamentally. An intelligent person can analyze why relationships fail, understand the mechanics of social inequality, or grasp the environmental consequences of modern life, but this understanding rarely translates into the ability to fix these issues. Knowledge becomes a burden when it reveals problems beyond individual control. Why your brain is your own worst enemy. Schopenhauer understood that the same mental faculties that make someone intellectually gifted also make them psychologically vulnerable. Intelligence doesn't just process information more efficiently, it processes more information, creating a unique set of psychological burdens that less analytical minds simply don't experience. The first burden is enhanced pattern recognition. Intelligent minds excel at identifying connections, predicting outcomes, and seeing underlying structures. But this gift becomes a curse when applied to negative experiences. Where an average person might dismiss a failed relationship as bad luck, the analytical person sees patterns across all their relationships, predicting future failures and becoming paralyzed by anticipated disappointment. Schopenhauer observed that intelligent people suffer from what he described as the inability to escape temporal awareness. The will is objectified in nature and manifests as constant striving without end. Their minds naturally project forward and backward, making every moment heavy with the weight of time. They can't simply exist in the present because their brains are constantly analyzing what led to this moment and where it might lead. The second burden is moral sensitivity. Intelligent minds don't just understand abstract ethical principles, they see the moral implications of everyday actions. This creates constant moral friction with a world that operates largely on convenience, self-interest, and unconscious habit. The thoughtful person becomes simultaneously judgmental of others and self-critical about their own moral compromises. The philosopher recognized that intelligence amplifies what he saw as the fundamental suffering of existence in multiple ways. Smart people are more aware of injustice, more sensitive to meaninglessness, and more capable of imagining alternative realities that highlight the inadequacy of the present one. They suffer not just from their own problems, but from their awareness of universal human problems. Schopenhauer also identified the problem of intellectual isolation. Intelligent people often struggle to find genuine connection because their minds operate on different frequencies from most others. They can't share their deepest thoughts without seeming pretentious or depressing. They can't engage in small talk without feeling intellectually suffocated. This creates a choice between authentic self-expression and social connection, a choice that less analytical people rarely face. The third burden is the curse of seeing through everything. Intelligent minds naturally analyze motivations, question assumptions, and deconstruct beliefs. This makes it difficult to participate naively in activities that bring others pleasure. They can't lose themselves in entertainment because they see the manipulation. They can't embrace simple philosophies because they understand their limitations. They can't accept easy answers because they see the complexity behind every question. Finally, Schopenhauer observed that intelligent people suffer from what he described as the tyranny of consciousness. As he noted, willing as a whole has no end in view, and every individual is driven by forces they cannot escape. Their minds never truly rest. While others can distract themselves with simple pleasures or lose themselves in routine activities, the analytical mind continues processing, questioning, and analyzing even during supposed relaxation. The philosopher's insight was that intelligence, rather than being a solution to life's problems, often just makes those problems more visible and more painful. The smart person doesn't suffer less than the average person. They suffer more consciously, more analytically, and with greater awareness of their own suffering. The intelligent person's guide to escaping mental prison. Despite his reputation as a pessimist, Schopenhauer offered genuine solutions for the intelligent person trapped in cycles of analytical suffering. His approach wasn't to become less intelligent, but to use intelligence more wisely, directing it toward liberation rather than endless rumination. The first escape route is aesthetic contemplation. Schopenhauer believed that only aesthetic pleasure creates momentary escape from the will, and that on the occurrence of an aesthetic appreciation, the will thereby vanishes entirely from consciousness. When genuinely absorbed in aesthetic experience, the mind stops analyzing and simply experiences. This provides relief from the constant burden of thought and offers glimpses of peace that analytical minds desperately need. As he wrote, "So near us always lies a sphere in which we escape from all our misery, but who has the strength to continue long in it?" As soon as any single relation to our will, to our person, even of these objects of our pure contemplation, comes again into consciousness, the magic is at an end. The key is learning to engage with beauty without analyzing it. Instead of thinking about why a piece of music works or what a painting represents, allow yourself to be absorbed in the direct experience. The second solution is accepting the limits of individual control. Much intelligent suffering comes from feeling responsible for problems beyond personal influence. Schopenhauer taught that wisdom involves understanding that the will operates according to forces larger than individual consciousness. This means clearly distinguishing between what you can and cannot change. Direct analytical energy toward problems that are actually solvable rather than universal human conditions. Practice intellectual humility by recognizing that understanding a problem doesn't create an obligation to solve it. You can be aware of social injustice without carrying personal responsibility for fixing society. You can understand relationship dynamics without being able to perfect human connection. This separation of understanding from obligation provides psychological relief. The third approach is cultivating what Schopenhauer called compassionate understanding. Instead of using your analytical abilities to judge others harshly, use them to understand the psychological forces driving human behavior. When you recognize that everyone operates under the same fundamental drives and limitations that Schopenhauer described as the will, criticism transforms into compassion. Schopenhauer also recommended what he described as limiting the service of knowledge to the will. He noted that for most people, knowledge serves only the service of the will, rather than becoming a contemplation of the pure object by the pure subject. Deliberately reducing news consumption, social media engagement, and other sources of mental input helps prevent analytical overload. Create spaces of mental quiet where your intelligence can rest rather than constantly engaging with new problems to solve. Finally, the philosopher suggested using your analytical gifts in service of genuine wisdom rather than endless knowledge accumulation. Focus on understanding yourself rather than everything else. Apply your intelligence to recognizing your own patterns, motivations, and sources of suffering. This self-directed analysis can lead to actual liberation rather than just more information about why liberation is difficult. Schopenhauer's ultimate insight was that intelligent suffering isn't inevitable. It's the result of misusing intellectual gifts. Through aesthetic experience, we can become a pure, will-less subject of knowledge and gain momentary relief from the pain that accompanies our striving. When you learn to direct your analytical abilities strategically, embrace aesthetic experience regularly, and accept the limits of individual control, intelligence becomes a tool for wisdom rather than a source of misery. The goal isn't to think less, but to think more skillfully, transforming your mental gifts from psychological burdens into genuine sources of understanding and peace.